Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Ed. Today we're going to talk about indicators. Indicators are chemicals that indicate or show whether a mixture is acidic or basic. Acids and bases are opposites, and when they react it's called neutralization. An indicator tells us whether the solution is either acidic or basic. Another word for basic is alkaline. The indicator that we're going to use today is based on red cabbage. Red cabbage gets its color from a pigment called an anthocyanin. Many of you are familiar with chlorophyll, which is a pigment found in green plants. Anthocyanins are pigments that are normally red or blue or purple, and this pigment changes color depending on whether the environment it's in is acidic or basic. This is what the cabbage looks like inside. This core has no anthocyanin, so we won't be interested in that part. We'll chop that out and throw it away. You'll need to have an adult help with this, because the knife that you'll need to use will be sharp and a little bit dangerous. You don't need to chop the cabbage very finely, just enough to help the process along. I'm going to place the cabbage on a tray so that I can put it in the freezer. And the reason I want to freeze the cabbage is that it breaks up the cells. That's a process called lysis. As ice crystals form, they break up the cells and it helps to release this red pigment. I put a piece of parchment in the bottom of my tray, but you don't need to do that. Here's the finished cabbage after I've chopped it and broken it up, and it's ready to go into the freezer. Now that I put the cabbage in the freezer, it needs to stay there for at least a few hours. Certainly you can leave it in there overnight or even for a couple of days. It doesn't matter if some ice crystals form on the cabbage, because all we're trying to do is break down the cells. Remember, that's called lysis, and it helps to get the pigment out. The pigment is what we're going to be getting out later, and that's what we really need. Now it's been a few hours and our cabbage should be frozen, so we're going to get it out of the freezer now and see what it looks like. So here's our cabbage, and it's frozen now completely. You can see it's frozen because it's crinkly and it's hard. It actually breaks. Now I have a pot here. You can use a 4-quart or a 5-quart or something around that vicinity, and we're going to put the cabbage into the pot so that we can begin the extraction. Alright, our cabbage is on the stove, so now what we're going to do is turn it on high and bring it to a rolling boil, and then when that happens, we'll stop and let it steep to extract the pigment. The first bubbles are just beginning to form, and we'll need to let that get a little bit hotter in order to extract all the pigment. Now that the cabbage has come to a rolling boil, we can turn off the heat and wait for it to cool. If you're in a hurry, one of the things you can do is to add ice cubes to cool this off even faster. So we're going to add some ice cubes now. I have a bowl full of ice cubes, about, say, a pint of ice cubes. I'm going to toss those in. I'm going to give it a stir to help work those in, to help cool this off. Even though we're diluting it, we're still cooling it, which will allow us to work a little bit faster. Don't add too much ice, because if you do, you'll be diluting the pigment that you're after to use as an indicator. As you can see, the ice is melted, and the mixture is a rich purple color. The easiest way to remove the cabbage now is simply to strain it off using a colander. If the pot's a little hot, which this one still is, I could use a towel. Remember that I'm not interested in the cabbage. It's perfectly fine to eat it now, but I'm not really interested in it from the perspective of collecting it. So I don't need to pour it all out of the pot. I can take my colander out, set it over there. Now I've got my indicator solution in a pitcher. It's ready to be used. It's a little bit warm right now, but I can still use it by withdrawing the amount that I need. You're going to want to use somewhere between, say, 20 milliliters and 100 milliliters, depending on what you're adding it to. A convenient way to save it and to measure it is to put it into ice cube trays and freeze it. You've noticed by now that you get a smell from the cabbage. Cabbage is a cruciferous crop, which means that it contains sulfur chemicals. Those sulfur-containing chemicals are what give it its distinctive smell. Many of you may find that smell unpleasant. One of the things you can do to minimize that is to freeze it. So what you can do is use an ice cube tray and freeze it into portions that are just right for doing this experiment. If you freeze this liquid, it'll keep a very long time, and it'll be ready for multiple experiments whenever you're ready to do it. You can use large ice cube trays, the kind that you would use for a drink, or you could use small trays, perhaps something that would be more like for candy making. You could pour your cabbage juice into an ice cube tray. Each ice cube will be approximately 1 experiment's worth. It's a good idea to put this onto a cookie sheet when you're done so that it's easy to lift. This tray is a little bit on the soft side, so as you can see it's very hard to lift like this. If I put it on a cookie sheet, it will be much easier to work with. I've actually used a cake pan for my materials, and now it's ready to go into the freezer. Once it's frozen, you'll want to take it out and put it in a bag, especially if you have a frost-free freezer, so that you don't lose volume. The rest of the material can be placed in the refrigerator, where it will keep for about a week. After that, it starts to get moldy. Now we're ready to put this in the refrigerator. As I said, you'll want to keep it for about a week. Anything longer than that, and it might start to get moldy. Now we finished up the first part of this experiment, where we've manufactured the indicator solution. The next part will be to use it. That's actually the more fun part.